Right. So, like I said, we are going to talk about Brexit today. And basically, what we are going to focus on today is the basics of Brexit. So, what does it mean? What is the problem? The timeline of events that have led up ultimately to the end of Brexit, or kind of the ultimatum of Brexit, as well as like some pros and cons. So, some of the things that are wanting people to stay, some versus some of the things that are wanting people to leave the European Union. Okay. So speaking of that, let's talk about kind of the definition of Brexit, or kind of some of the basic ideas. All right. So Brexit in general stands for the British exit. Okay. It's just a nice little, what's the word you use for that? A mashup. Okay. Brexit stands for British exit. The British exit from what? The UK and Britain leaving the European Union. Okay. So Britain, or I should say the UK, doesn't just consist of Britain. It consists of Britain, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Basically, the group of islands around that area of Western Europe, as well as Northern Ireland. So all four of those sovereign countries leaving the European Union, okay? We've had a little bit of conversations, or we've had some exposure to the European Union in our discussions between Turkey and the European Union about how Turkey wanted to be a part of the European Union, but there were some pros and cons that we discussed as well as to whether or not that was a good idea, okay? But the European Union, just as a refresher, is a political and economic sovereignty between 28 countries. These 28 countries basically work like states, like the United States, okay? So all of them kind of follow specific international guidelines that are set by the European Union, so different political and social and cultural norms that they have to follow, as well as different economic systems that they have that are similar to each other to make free, open borders, trade, migration, et cetera, possible, okay? This is why we talk about Brexit when we talk about movement, because the Europeans' open borders and free movement guidelines, or the European Union's free movement guidelines, are essential to some of the successes that Europe has with trade, with economic prosperity, with travel, et cetera, okay? So the European Union is a group of 28 countries that have all of these different things in common and that follow the same specific guidelines set by the European Union, okay? Britain had decided, or the UK had decided, like, hey, we are leaving this. There are a variety of different reasons that we'll go over later, but basically they said that it is not beneficial for them to be a part of the European Union anymore. We're gonna bounce, okay? When we look at our timeline, we'll see that there was basically a vote that was had where a majority of the population decided that was something that they did not want to be a part of anymore. And essentially, once the UK decided, hey, we're not going to be a part of the European Union anymore, there are three options that they had to go with. Number one, they could go back on their decision and stay in the European Union. Number two, they could leave the European Union with terms and conditions, basically some residues that helped the relationship between these other countries. Or three, they could leave with a no deal, meaning they just cut ties entirely with no plans for the future. They just say peace out and like flip the middle finger as they're leaving, okay? Those are the three options that they're faced with as they are deciding they want to leave the European Union, okay? These decisions, or these three options, are going to be discussed in length over the time period, or over this timeline of the British exit. But eventually, kind of spoiler alert, okay? Eventually they are going to leave, okay? We have reached a point literally early or late last year where they have officially exited, and we'll get to that in just a second, okay? All right, so the basics in terms of terminology and who's involved, we've gone over that. Let's go ahead and talk about the timeline of the British exit from the very beginning to the end, okay? All right, so it all starts with a vote, okay? Just as other democratic systems or constitutional systems, it all started with a vote, okay? The cabinet, or I should say parliament, had decided that they wanted to take this vote. where there were multiple members of parliament saying that they did not want to be a part of the European Union anymore, but it doesn't really matter what parliament says, it's what the people want, okay? So Parliament had orchestrated this vote on June 23rd, 2016, and 51.9% of voters, or the citizens of the UK, so of Scotland, Wales, Britain, and Northern Ireland, voted to leave the European Union. So 51.9% is approximately 17.4 million people had decided that it was time to leave the European Union. Although 1.9% to like decide a majority isn't a lot, it was still a majority. So Parliament now has to go forth and say, all right, we have to have some kind of action. This is what the people want. We are going to exit the European Union. Sam? I can hear it from here. That means it's too loud. All right, so this vote happened on June 23rd, and it was a vote nationwide, right, throughout the entire UK. The prime minister at the time, his name was David Cameron, when this vote happened, okay? David Cameron, in the days leading up to this vote, had basically said, hey, this is not a good idea. We need to stay in the European Union. There are a lot more benefits than negatives to being in the European Union, et cetera, et cetera. So when the vote came out that the people had decided they want to leave the European Union, the next day, June 24th, David Cameron stepped down. He had this giant speech outside of Parliament basically saying, you know, you, the people, have decided what you want from your government or what you want from us as Parliament. And my personal beliefs conflict with that. So I am stepping down so somebody who can represent you better can lead you through this process. It was very emotional, very heartfelt. And the person who decides to kind of, or the person that they had voted, the person who had appointed this role after David Cameron steps down, is Theresa May. So David Cameron said, I cannot represent you the way you want to be represented in this matter. You need somebody to help you through. Theresa May is going to be the person to help them through. Theresa May was a pretty controversial lady. There were a lot of people that liked her and liked her ideas with moving forward with the British exit, but there were also a lot of people who did not like her either. There were some, you know, very common conversations, like anytime a woman comes into power of a major country, like, oh, she's a woman. Is she actually going to be able to do this? This is a long process, et cetera, et cetera. But there were also some things that she had said that people didn't agree with, okay? So as soon as Theresa May steps up into the prime minister position, basically from that point on in 2016, in the summer of 2016 through early 2019, the entirety of the timeline of the British exit consists of negotiating, proposing plans, it getting shot down, rewriting, et cetera, okay? So from 2016 to 2019, Theresa May and the rest of Parliament basically spent all of their time trying to write a proposal or write a deal to help the exit transition smoothly, okay? And through 2016 to 2019, they had proposed at least 4 to 5 times, and it was struck down every single time, okay? So we get through 2019, and we're up on the deadline, basically. The deadline of having a proposed and accepted plan to the British exit was April 30th, 2019. It's April 10th, 2019 on our timeline, and they don't have anything yet. They have still not finished their rewrites. They have still not had a plan be accepted. So they decide to pass Article 50, which is an extension of the decision to October 31st, 2019. So they're extending the decision deadline from the end of April to the end of October, okay? Mixed feelings about this decision. Some people are like, yeah, we need to extend it because we can't just throw together a plan in hopes that it's accepted. We have to have something good. Other people are like, no, this has taken 3 years already. You are just extending your time for the decision. You need to make something happen. You're failing, okay? All right, I'm going to show you guys a quick video before we get into or more into our timeline. Basically, this video was released the day after the decision to leave the European Union. So it's going to go over a couple of things that, like reasons they want to leave, reasons they might want to stay, and where the process looks from here. So like I said, June 24th, 2016 is literally the day after, okay? So this is going to give us a little bit of an insight or a little bit of a preemptive strike into where we're going to go with this, okay?
Voters in the United Kingdom have voted to leave the European Union.
I hope this victory brings down this failed project and leads us to a Europe of sovereign nation states.
It's a major blow to European political and economic integration and a huge embarrassment for British Prime Minister David Cameron.
Britain is better off inside the EU than out on our own. At the heart of that is the single market. 500 million customers on our doorstep. The source of so many jobs, so much trade, and such a wealth of opportunity for our young people.
Britain's exit, or the Brexit as it's called, will have huge implications for the British economy. The EU functions as a single integrated economy, kind of like the United States. And now that Britain is out, regulations could make it harder to move goods across the English Channel. Lots of multinational corporations have their headquarters in London, but now they might find that it makes more sense to have their European headquarters in the European Union, which could lead to job losses in Britain. The EU also allows for the free movement of people within its member states, which means that any EU citizen can live and work in any other EU country without a visa. And the UK's high employment rate has drawn migrants from poorer countries in the EU, like Poland and Lithuania. But many in Britain resent these migrants, and that resentment was a key driving force in the decision for Britain to leave the European Union. So now that Britain's out, nobody really knows what's going to happen to all those EU migrants. So what comes next? A long negotiation between the UK and the EU's member states, where they have to hash out issues like trade, tariffs, agriculture, immigration, and a whole host of other issues. Nobody really knows what this means for the other EU countries. They could rally together and push for even more integration. Or some countries could look at Britain and say, we should get out too. But one thing is clear, Britain's exit is a huge blow to the dream of a united Europe.
All right, so like it said, the whole purpose of the European Union is this quote, like united Europe thing, so that all of these countries can work together, live together, cooperate together without borders, without different barriers, et cetera, kind of like what happens in the United States, okay? But when this British exit happened, or like they said, it poses a lot of problems, it poses a lot of issues, and they just have to basically work through it, okay? All right, so hopping back onto our timeline really quickly, okay? So they had announced that they wanted to move the deadline from the end of April to the end of October. They obviously accept this deadline, or they accept this extension because they want to make sure they have a good plan coming out. However, like I said, the people are very upset with Theresa May that it is taking this long. And by July 23rd, so the summer of 2019, Theresa May steps down, is removed, is voted out, whatever you want to say. Basically, she was on her way to getting voted out anyway, and she decided to resign to kind of save face, whatever. So July 23rd, Theresa May steps down, she resigns, and the winning seat, or the voted seat, goes to Boris Johnson. So he is now the new prime minister. So this process has now gone through 3 prime ministers. We started with David Cameron, Theresa May tried her best, and now Boris Johnson is the prime minister on the end, okay? So Boris Johnson becomes the prime minister in the middle of the summer of 2019. The deadline is still October 31st. So he spends the rest of the summer throughout the fall trying to propose plans, or trying to figure out a plan that will be accepted by the European Union and all of those involved. And on October 18th, 2019, Boris Johnson proposes a plan, his first one. However, some of the things that he was asking for was making specifically Ireland mad. And we'll see what the conversation or what the conflict is between the UK and Ireland in this instance in just a second. But specifically, Boris Johnson's plan was making Ireland very mad, and it gets struck down. Because other countries are also agreeing with what was making Ireland upset. Okay? So it's October 18th. The deadline is October 31st. Their plan was just struck down. So they're asking for another extension. They wait for a little bit. They try and kind of get their ducks in a row to make sure that they have a new plan, or at least an idea for a new plan. But by October 28th, they realize that they don't have anything that they can propose again. So another extension from basically the original one of October 31st. The new extension date is January 31st. So again, they're given another extension. The British people are getting very antsy again. They were like, hey, you remember how we just got rid of somebody because they weren't getting this done and they were offering extensions? You're not looking so good, buddy, okay? You got to get this shit done. However, even though they had done another extension by late January of 2020, so right up to the next extension date, they had given a new plan, or they had proposed a new plan. It is discussed within the European Union and approved. So Boris Johnson had succeeded in proposing a plan and coming up with this plan, or at least negotiating and rewriting a plan that all parties would be satisfied with these terms and agreements, or terms and conditions of leaving the European Union. So this happens in late 2020 or late January of 2020. And by January 31st, 2020, the UK leaves the European Union and enters a transition period until the end of the year. So basically from January 31st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, UK is in a transition period of basically pulling out different markets, getting ready and getting secured, and being officially exited from the European Union. This was a chance for their parliament and their sovereignty, or their sovereign, I should say, to discuss what's best for them, to make new deals and make new plans that would benefit their economy and their political systems. And anything else that needed to be done, they had to do it within that January 31st to December 31st timeline. And at the end of the year, they were going to be officially done, okay? So obviously January 31st, 2020 was right before things got real bad, right? So January 31st, 2020 is basically right before the pandemic started, when we're just kind of getting the preliminary talkings and workings of the pandemic. So Boris Johnson and the UK probably would have never guessed that this was going to be what their transition period looked like. Nevertheless, they got a lot of that done. And officially by the end of the year, so as of 11 p.m. on December 31st, 2020, the UK is no longer a part of the EU single market and customs union. Officially, on December 31st, the UK has left the building. They are no longer a part of the European Union. They had successfully completed their transition period, and they are an independent, non-unionized country once again, or I should say countries. So basically throughout the year of 2021 so far, they have been navigating no longer being a part of this European Union, as well as navigating the aftermath of the pandemic, right? Or I should say, I shouldn't even say the aftermath, it's not over. The end stages of the pandemic, okay? And things seem to be in a pretty good spot for UK. They've kind of set themselves up for success during their transition period. But also, again, there's no really good way to criticize anything that's happening because it's a pandemic. So any of the things that like may be happening to their economy or may be happening to their political structure because of their leaving of the European Union could also be attributed to a lack of jobs, labor shortage, et cetera, from pandemic, okay? All right, so the UK has officially left the building. That kind of closes our timeline, basically, from the beginning in 2016 to the end at the end of 2020, okay? So 2021 has been basically a new year for UK, and we're continuing to see the aftermath or what's kind of happening as a result of them leaving, okay? But we have to kind of go back and look at why they want to leave or stay in the first place, okay? So basically, what options were the UK facing as they were going through this process? Should they stay or should they go? Okay. So this is when we're going to kind of go, we are going to go over the reasons that some or the majority of the population wanted to leave the European Union versus some of the reasons that they wanted to stay in the European Union, basically showing both sides of the argument. Because we're going to go over tomorrow, basically through your activity, some more of those pros and cons and some more of those things that say, hey, we should stay or hey, we should go. Okay. All right, so why stay? What are the issues or what are the reasons that the UK should stay in the European Union or should have stayed in the European Union? Okay. Number one, open borders. Like I said, the European Union basically works like the United States does, where they have open borders between all of the countries as a part of the European Union, meaning that I can go from Italy to Spain to Poland to Germany to any of those other countries freely and however I want, okay? I could live in Italy and work in Spain because of these open borders. I can migrate from place to place because of these open borders. I don't need to have visas for work or for play, okay? Basically, I can move anywhere within these European Union borders and be completely fine, okay? This also means not only can I do that as an individual, but corporations and businesses can transport and trade their products the same way. Meaning that if I'm a company in Spain that sells apples or something like that, okay, that I can transport my apples freely throughout all of the countries in the European Union, and I don't have to worry about visa checks, I don't have to worry about tariffs or trading things, et cetera, okay? Because they're all theoretically under the same roof, okay? All right, number two, why they wanted to stay or why most of the people wanted to stay. There was a labor shortage happening in the UK that was really only going to be filled by migrants from other countries. So they had all of these new businesses and all of these new industries that were popping up in the UK and not enough bodies to fill those jobs. How are they going to get the bodies to fill those jobs? Asking those from other European countries to come and work in the UK. Thank you. So if I leave the UK if the UK leaves the European Union, those labor jobs are not going to get filled. There's going to be an economic downturn and some of those companies might suffer, okay? Number three, multi-country security. If a non-European country attacked a member of the European Union, all of the other 27 countries are obligated to come to its aid, whether with monetary value, military might, or political support. They have to. It's part of being in the European Union, okay? So let's say that Russia tries to attack Germany or Russia tries to attack the UK. All of the other countries would have to go and help out that country being attacked and fight against those other countries, okay? We know, or at least I hope we remember or know, okay, based on our conversations from World War I and World War II, that kind of alliance system can be really, really tricky. But in terms of multi-country security, things are not going to get in as easily and security threats are not going to be as easily tolerated, okay? All right, number four, with leaving the European Union, the UK would have the ability to change existing law in whatever way they wanted, okay? There are certain laws that exist because of the European Union when it comes to the UK. Certain things on food safety, certain things on health standards, certain things on cultural and societal, what's the word I'm looking for? Cultural and societal sensitivity, basically, right? So some of those laws could be changed on a whim by Parliament or by the members of Congress, basically, without being in the European Union. So those things that are kind of near and dear to people's hearts could be changed, okay? And then number 5, kind of the last reason why the UK wants to stay, or why people in the UK wanted to stay in the European Union, is because Northern Ireland posed a massive problem to this discussion. Okay, so the Northern Ireland versus Ireland debate posed a huge rift. So we're going to watch a quick video about why that's so important.
Why is Northern Ireland holding up Brexit? It's the smallest nation in the UK and the one with the fewest residents. But Northern Ireland has become one of the biggest parts of the Brexit negotiations. In fact, its border could end up deciding the future of the whole of Europe. So why is the Irish border question so important? After Brexit, the border between England, Scotland and Wales will stay exactly the same because, well, we're all on one island which doesn't border any EU country. And because Northern Ireland is part of the UK, it will leave the European Union too. But unlike England, Scotland and Wales, it shares a border with an EU country, the Republic of Ireland. So this 300-mile stretch will be a brand new external border of the European Union. And there lies the big problem. You see, they're worried about how you would go about checking the goods crossing in and out of the EU. So what are the options? Maybe you could just build some customs posts and fences along the border. But for a load of people, that is the last thing they want. Northern Ireland has had fences and checkpoints on the border before, and during that time, more than 3,600 people died in a 30-year conflict known as the Troubles. And the issue of the border was at the heart of this fighting over the sovereignty of Northern Ireland. There were fears that putting fences back up could lead to a return of the violence of the past. And like I said, nobody wants that. But negotiators, they're struggling to come up with a solution to make the border work. So why is it so hard? Well, first, we need to go back almost 100 years. This is the island of Ireland. It all used to be part of Britain into a bloody war of independence. Between 1919 and 1921, the Irish Republican Army and British security forces were at war. Then at the end of the conflict, Ireland was split up. The southern part became a separate country, but Northern Ireland stayed in the United Kingdom. But that wasn't the end of the argument. Nationalists and Republicans, mostly drawn from the Catholic community, wanted a united Ireland. Unionists and Loyalists, most of them Protestant, vowed to keep the province British. In the late 1960s, violence erupted. Republican and Loyalist paramilitaries fought each other, and British soldiers stationed in Northern Ireland clashed with Republicans. Finally, in 1998, there was a breakthrough peace deal, the Good Friday Agreement, and a drastic reduction in violence. In the years that followed, the British Army checkpoints were removed, and ID and custom checks disappeared. Now, the border is almost invisible. If you're really paying attention, you might notice the road signs changing from miles to kilometers. But that's just about it. Then Britain voted for Brexit. Theresa May made it clear that any exit deal we struck would mean leaving the EU's single market and customs union. That means the border will become the crossing point for goods entering the EU from outside. Now, that's really the core of the issue. EU negotiators say they want some kind of customs control. They want to stop products that don't meet EU standards, like unsafe food crossing the border. Police in Northern Ireland say a hard border would become a target for dissident Republicans, hardline Irish nationalists who have vowed to carry on attacking symbols of British rule. The EU and the British and Irish government all agree that they don't want a hard border to return. They can't agree on what to do about customs checks. There has been talk of some kind of high-tech solution that would mean lorries could cross the border without being stopped and checked, or checks could be done away from the border. This is actually what happens already to control cross-border trade in some goods, including fuel, alcohol, and tobacco. But there's a danger that a proper deal can't be worked out in time. The EU has always said it wants a backstop, an agreement about what would happen if no detailed plan for Brexit is in place. Brussels thinks the answer is for Northern Ireland to stay in the customs union. That would effectively mean pushing the border back to here, the sea border between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. But it also means treating Northern Ireland differently to the rest of the United Kingdom. So now it's Unionists, not Republicans, who'd be angry. Theresa May's party is still officially called the Conservative and Unionist Party. the Tories are committed to Northern Ireland remaining part of the UK. And because the last general election didn't go as well as expected, the Prime Minister now relies on a Northern Irish Unionist party, the DUP, to give her a majority in Parliament. So Northern Irish Unionists effectively have a veto on British government policy. Mrs May needs to hammer out some kind of compromise, and she has hinted about keeping Britain in some kind of customs arrangement. She needs to find a solution that will satisfy Brussels, her Unionist colleagues, and the wider British public. And if nothing else, the last 2 years of Brexit negotiations have shown that it won't be easy.
All right, so this is kind of talking, and you know, this was made a couple of years ago when Theresa May was still Prime Minister. But it highlights the Irish problem very nicely. Okay, that we've got this northern portion versus the rest of the portion, basically. And there's issues on borders, there's issues on customs, there's issues on transportation and movement, et cetera, okay? So basically by staying, you eliminate all of those problems, right? All right, last but not least, let's talk about why they decided to go, or what were the major themes that were pushing people to want to leave the European Union, okay? The number one reason we kind of highlighted this, or highlighted this at the very beginning, is immigration, okay? That because there are open borders and because those borders are not thoroughly checked, we are having, or I should say the UK was having a massive amount of immigration and migration into the UK with nowhere to put them, basically, okay? That is not the only reason by any means. So the immigration, argument was mostly based out of racism. That we had lots and lots of migrants and refugees coming from like Middle Eastern countries as well as Eastern European countries that they didn't want in the country, okay? So that's like number one reason that immigration was an issue. But along with that, there was also this worry that there wasn't enough place for them, that there wasn't enough room for them in the economy, in the political structure, et cetera, okay? So immigration was the number one reason. Number two was membership fees, okay? Being a part of the European Union isn't free. There were millions of dollars in membership fees that the UK had to pay to be a part of this membership, or be a part of this union with all of its benefits, okay? That money came from the public's taxes, okay? So if we were to leave the European Union, or if the UK were to leave the European Union, those membership fees would be non-existent. Citizens would have to pay lower taxes, or they wouldn't have to pay as many taxes. And we would be circulating more economy, or more money into the economy versus into the European Union. Number three is that even though there is free trade betwixt all of the countries of the European Union, there are certain countries that EU countries are not allowed to trade with. So by leaving the European Union, the UK opens up more trade partners and more opportunity for movement, okay? So for example, the two biggest ones that EU countries have very heavy restrictions and very heavy trade tariffs on are China and Russia, because of the difference in political opinion between those countries, okay? So by leaving the European Union, the UK would be able to trade with those two very large markets that they weren't able to before, okay? Number four was British sovereignty, okay? Britain thrives and has always thrived on being independent, on being a sovereign nation, and a very powerful one at that. But being a part of the European Union, some citizens felt like that was taking away from their, quote, British identity. That they were no longer able to operate and occupy as a British sovereign, more so as just a member of the European Union, okay? So basically, if they left the European Union, they would be able to reclaim their independence as a British, independent entity, and all of the stuff that comes with that, okay? And then last but not least, even though there was a labor shortage, or even though some people were discussing that there was a labor shortage in the UK, they thought that leaving the European Union would expand the job market because of more industries being able to set up in a non-European Union country, okay? Basically that all of these tech jobs and all of these different industries that were wanting to get into the European Union but were unable to can now relocate to the UK, either Britain, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, whatever it may be, and it would actually expand the job market instead of shrinking it, okay? So we've looked at the pros of staying in the European Union. We've looked at the cons of leaving the European Union, or I should say the cons of staying in the European Union. Okay. It's kind of, or it was up to them basically of which one they would like to outweigh. All right. And obviously these reasons here, the immigration issues, the membership fees, British independence, et cetera, was going to outweigh those reasons to stay. Okay. So like I said, that timeline has basically closed. Now we just get to see what happens in the future. But tomorrow we're going to look a little bit more deeply into those reasons as to why they're staying, why they're leaving, and kind of finish up that conversation. So you guys can go ahead and put your notes away, please, and thank you. That is it for today in terms of Brexit.